I never thought we'd see the relevancy of bring Loki again. Well, that's the effect of colorless dual flying skills, I guess, which never were a thing before. Let's find out how to use these things.
Let the lesson begin.
What's up, guys? Akariss here, bringing you another Fire Emblem Heroes video. Today's video is going to focus on colorless dual flying 4, which is the last dual skill, not including armors, I guess, which very likely won't happen, but here we are. So this particular dual skill is more specific because there's not really that many candidates for it, but I would say that the candidates for it are definitely more impactful or more limited, like more specific in how you can use them, and they definitely can be useful. So if we look at the 4-star pool, so to speak, or Grail pool, there's literally only 3 options, which are presented to you guys here to the left. I feel like I may go through a full dual skill kind of overall perspective in a different video, but this one will focus on the final, in my opinion, final dual skill. So these heroes here, one of them being Vika, who's fairly new but limited, and Loki and Camilla being a bit older, they're still worth talking about, and I'm going to compare them with 5-star options later on this video, so be sure to stick around for that. Before we get into the specifics here, I do implore you to smash the like button and sub if you haven't already. I do notice you guys doing it, and I appreciate it. It really does make a difference. The videos that get them, yeah, keep coming. So thank you guys. All right, so honestly, if you are a Vika user or plan to potentially merge up Vika, she is probably one of the better, like, if not the best kind of C Duel Flying 4 user in the F2P kind of area. Now, mind you, it's not really F2P with 4-star specials or focuses. They're cheaper on average to +10, but you're still ultimately spending orbs for them, and it is gacha, and you may not even like get them in an ideal amount of orbs. So be mindful of that risk, but she is pretty cool in that she is like a high res, high speed unit, which can lend to some nice trace, gale force, and sabotage support. I won't be covering her in this video since she's limited and people likely won't have access to her, but keep that in mind if you want to hold on to the fodder should you have access to it. Also, another thing, I do think the utility of green, like the actual unit itself that has C Duel Flying 4, might be worth keeping around, not only because we might get further options later down the road, but because, well, she's pretty good. She's pretty high utility. Also not mentioned or shown here is the new Nana that came out that was a healer, and I don't feel it's worth the dual skill because healers score really poorly, and if you're trying to optimize for arena, it doesn't really make sense to basically just use a low scoring unit. However, if you want to, they're good. Like, healers are good, but it's just unfortunate that it is a score hit. So I want to make sure that I optimize for the mode that it's intended. With that being said, I want to start with some builds here, and of course some of the weapons that come along with that. So first up is HS Cam. One thing I want you guys to keep in mind is there is a possibility she ends up as a Forma in 2 holoforms seasons from now, like 2 more rotations, which would be in 2 months. So before you go about like foddering pretty hard or even merging up or investing into someone like Camilla, you might want to consider waiting to see what the Fates lineup is and whether Cam could be a nice Forma option. To be honest, I might even consider it myself because I did use Cam quite a bit in the past, so it would be nice to bring her back. And something like C Duel Flying 4, which unfortunately is seasonal, but combined with like all the awesome premium options you can get from a holoforms, could lend itself to potentially being picked up. This can apply to Spring Loki as well when we rotate back into heroes characters, so maybe waiting is the best option. Either way, I'll show some builds here, and you can always review this video in the future. So with Cam, ideally, like, there are a lot of good dagger options, and they don't even necessarily require like premium summoning. A lot of this stuff can be picked up from the codes, from paths, or potentially grails. So honestly, when it comes to your options from daggers, they're pretty good. The most notable one, if you hate meta units and you really want to just kill them, Courtly Fan Wind Sweep, as shown below me, is a good way to do that. However, you do trade Trace by doing so, meaning it's harder to hit and run. You basically have to commit to that position or hit them over something like a river or water or mountains where they can't reach you on their turn. This is usually the ideal way to use something like Courtly Fan Wind Sweep in Arena. It's pretty nice. It's not bad. I think it could do work. The other way that I could see you using someone like Cam would have to be with Sky Mayogi. We'll cover Loki in a moment. So with Sky Mayogi, we got the armor effectiveness, but you can combine that with Trace to give yourself even more damage, and it's, again, going to help you with quite a few armors that you will see in Arena. I'd say on average you might run into like 1 armor per match, maybe like about 4 armors per full Arena run, so it is worth considering Sky Mayogi Dagger to be able to take care of those. But Trace is something you'll see throughout this video, and it is very good for Arena because mobility in general is hard to use or incorporate into Arena because of the scoring system. Finally, a decent way to use Camilla is also with Tamari as a long-range support unit. Something with guidance is with Trace, and Tamari is another great way to do it. She does have a decent base res stat that can be used with Tamari to give yourself decent long-range support, so I could see that as well. Tamari being the attack and speed debuff on foes with a res check. Pretty self-explanatory. Either way, Cam could be weighted to see if she ends up as a formal option and revive for quite a few of you. As you guys noticed, let's talk about Spring Loki. Now, with Spring Loki, I feel like, again, a lot of the bows are going to be accessible, but have different functions compared to what you get out of daggers. Remember that daggers like Tamari can debuff attack and speed, and then you can actually attack into a foe and debuff defense and res. So daggers do have that awesome utility. However, in contrast, bows have effective against flyers and slightly different options. The effective against flyers can be really useful for baiting out something like Legendary Azura, or potentially even Claude, but that one would be a bit harder because you would need speed and might not kill him through effective damage. Either way, baiting out those flyers is pretty nice and something to highly consider when comparing Spring Loki and Hot Springs Camilla. But the bows function differently compared to the daggers and what you can accomplish. So Fortune Bow is something that you could technically get from Anna in the Path 2, but it actually debuffs defense and res as opposed to attack and speed, and Loki herself, her res stat isn't as high, so I didn't even bother incorporating that into these builds. But what you'll see here is Reindeer Bow, which has a guard effect, Coral Bow, which has a rain effect, which is nice, but does require more ideal positioning, and finally Instant Bow from Sedgar, which is an impact effect. Either way, either guard or impact effects will help you attack into stuff and survive. Combinations of Wind Sweep or Far Trace in the B skill will do a lot of work. One thing I really don't like about either of these flyers, like Spring Loki or Hot Springs Camilla, is unfortunately they cannot afford to run a rain skill in their C without lowering their potential score, and that kind of sucks. So you are gonna have to use something like Menace or Joint Drives, unfortunately, when it comes to supportive options as opposed to the rain skills. So the only way you can do it is something like Coral Bow, which is from Joshua, I believe, like Summer Joshua, and again the positioning won't be as ideal to do, but they are what we have right now, and they're not terrible, but they're not like, oh my god, mind-blowing options. To be honest with you guys though, the 5-star options look a lot better, so if you do end up considering premium investing here, this is where it really matters. Now, you could consider this sort of a tier list, but ultimately it's just like, where do you best use your C Duel Flying 4 list? The 3 and 4 star here kind of rankings are just characters that can't optimize C Duel Flying 4 because they're healers or they're outdated with no preference weapon. So someone like Mia is a healer with no preference, Hot Springs Sakura, same idea, and Kagero and Takumi are just really old with no preference weapons, and there's really no reason to invest in them compared to Spring Loki or Hot Springs Camilla. But with healers, it's unfortunate. Leanne doesn't have a preference stance skill, so you're effectively just losing score on those investments. However, the 5-star options like Warrior Princess Hinoka, the New Year's Plumeria, Brave Claude, and Pirate Tibarn are really good C Duel Flying 4 options should you be able to bring them up to +10. In fact, really impactful. Like, they will definitely win you games and be extremely impactful as long-term investments compared to Hot Springs, Camilla, and Loki. They're serviceable, but these ones here are going to be a lot better. For you guys who use Eir and Grima though, Eir could be due for a Mythic remix next year if that does happen, which could really buff up her potential. But she also gives Sparkling boost with long range healing, can also use Tamari or Lifyaberg, which has an impact built in. It's actually a pretty solid weapon. Her attack and speed isn't anything that's something to laugh at. It's pretty good. And Grima is finally relevant with scoring thanks to C Duel Flying 4. However, you do have to trade out her A preference skill, and that sucks, which does obviously hinder her performance as a combat unit, which I've always praised. But she'll still end up being pretty good, being a flyer, being colorless, having access to dragon skills, and can still actually use IO's shield in the seal to fight against bow units. She's not terrible, and I would consider it an overall buff to give her C Duel Flying 4 to optimize your arena experience, and therefore combine her with other high scorers and make your arena experience easier. I want to showcase and talk about some of the 5-star builds and why they are important if you do plan to merge them up in the long term. Some of these characters here they age really well and will be even good in AR as well, such as Hinoka, Claude. Well, Claude less so because of Fatal Smoke, but Refine might bring him back, and Pirate Tibarn even I use to this day with absolutely no merges, so the investments in AR and Arena do go quite a long way. So first up, let's talk about these three. So Hinoka has an incredible weapon in the form of Warrior Princess, and honestly, this is like one of the better refines in the game. It gives a joint drive, attack, and speed, which is crazy good, and it has a pretty generous 3-space daunt effect on attack, speed, and defense. This is incredible on top of the effective against flying and armored. Really powerful weapon, really good support unit, and because she does have that preference weapon, she can also afford to use a rain skill like attack defense rain or attack speed rain in her C skill and still score optimally, which is really awesome. So I really like what you can do with Hinoka, and I think she's not even that hard to merge up. Neither would Brave Claude be, and Brave Claude would likely get a refine next year, which is crazy considering how good his weapon already is, with 5 tall stats, healing on special activation. He has access to IO's shield and the seal if you end up giving him a 300 SPC skill. He uses those stats really well. He's gonna be pretty solid as well. So finally, Pirate Tibarn kind of reminds me of like Naysala in this aspect, but he does have more things going for him, which is his auto double with a decent speed stat. Because of his auto double speed stat being decent and slaying weapon, he can pretty much with dive bomb snipe things, get out of danger. You could even combine him with a near trace skill, maybe afford taking a hit because his bulk is pretty good in the defense stat, and just completely wipe teams using only Pirate Tibarn. As you can tell, the difference between the 5-star premium options and the 3-4-star options in Spring Loki and Hot Springs Camilla are pretty wide. And the C Duel Flying 4 overall should probably be held for one of these guys if you plan to merge it up, or just keep a green. So I'd really only recommend like Spring Loki or HS Cam take that skill from you only if you like them quite a bit, because they're not likely to get refines, or maybe they end up with a Form of Soul. You end up building them quite inexpensively. Finally, the last point I want to talk about here is the mythics and the legendary options, which are Eir and Grima. So with Eir, she could be due for a remix next year. We will find out. No guarantee on that yet, but she is not bad of an option already due to Sparkling Boost and healing just being limited in general, with Lifyaberg actually being still a good weapon. So it has that attack speed 4 and impact effect, plus it has dagger debuffs, and she has access to trace, like with all of these characters, which makes her nice. Finally, with Grima, because of C Duel Flying 4 and having to sub out her Dragon Skin 2 effect, it kinda sucks a lot, but I still think she's quite a powerful unit that you can still get by, especially if you summon or support her and provide a lot of buffs from your team that she can likely still carry your team quite a bit. Speed stacking her instead of using Dragon Wall with res is an alternative. You don't have to necessarily use attack res form. There's a lot of ways to build and use her, and I don't think she's going to be lacking at all. Unfortunately, for you Ike fans, ultimately, I think the worst Earth Legendary ends up being Legendary Ike due to Tiki's buffs and due to C Duel Flying 4 finally giving access to Grima, where she can choose to use her really good A skill or potentially score a lot better with C Duel Flying 4 and still be functional in my opinion, or at least provide guidance support. So this is quite a turn of events. I still think Tiki's going to be pretty solid, especially if you watch yesterday's Tiki video. You'll see why she's really leveled up, in my point of view, from dead last to quite good. So yeah, that pretty much covers my take here on C Duel Flying 4, guys. As I said in the beginning, I probably will do an overall perspective on dual skills and revisit a lot of my older videos, such as Grails, Grail investments, and just legendaries and mythics rankings once we approach book 6 and I see what the game brings for us. Thank you guys for watching as always. If you made it to this part of the video, I appreciate it. Smash the like button, sub if you haven't already. If you love me or potentially any of the characters in this video, then consider the Patreon in the description below. Best way to support the channel. It keeps me producing these videos for you. Love you all. See you in the next one. Peace.
It's over.